I'd now like to invite, as I mentioned, another Region 4 colleague, Bishop Mike Rinehart of the Texas-Louisiana Gulf Coast Synod of the ELCA. You think Nebraska Synod's a long name. Here he comes. The Reverend Mike Rinehart is Bishop of the Gulf Coast Synod, and it's a community of over 100 congregations. He's going to check me here to make sure I'm right.
That's accurate.
Okay, good. Campus ministries, retreat centers, and other agencies. Michael studied music at Valparaiso University, a Lutheran University in Valparaiso, Indiana.
Yes.
Yeah, it's accurate so far. Focusing on organ performance and singing in the Valparaiso University Schola Cantorum. Yeah. He received his Master of Divinity at Trinity Lutheran Seminary in Columbus, Ohio. He lives in Montgomery, Texas, with his wife and children and granddaughter, who's beautiful.
Thank you.
You had so much to do with that. Mike is another colleague I appreciate deeply. Many of you who are rostered ministers got to hear him present to us at our fall Reformation event. Mike is just an incredibly engaged bishop, engaged at the synod level, his own synod, but also regionally and the church at large. He's got an outstanding social media presence, stays communicated well with all. I think it's legend, but apparently he can post Facebook with one hand while he's tweeting with the other. Is that? I haven't seen it, but I've heard it. Okay. And Mike is just a delight to spend time around. He's one of those nice guys you get to hang around with, and you wonder, how does he get everything done that he does? But somehow he does. And he was willing. He also has a mild sense of humor. Mike, it is a real pleasure to welcome you back to Nebraska Synod.
Thank you.
We want to present you with the gift as well. I'll leave it there so you don't have to pick it up and set it back down.
Okay.
But again, we want you to think of Nebraska as you enjoyed that. And thanks for interrupting some time off to be with us here in Nebraska.
Yep.
We appreciate
Good
it.
to be with you.
All right. Welcome.
All right, thanks. Do I roll right into the presentation now, or is that later? Keynote now, or later? Okay, very good. Thanks. Is this on? Okay, fantastic. Good. Hey, good to be with you today. Thank you for the gift. He said some things to remind me of Nebraska. It's a banana. No. Yeah. No, this is good stuff. These these candies. Oh, look. All right, yeah. Hit me up afterwards. I'm willing to share it. This is part of the thing. Let's see what else. And be happy. Aqua popcorn. Oh my gosh, this is lovely. There's some good stuff in here, and this is nice. Okay, we'll talk. You have to come and see me, and I'll even share the banana. Thank you so much for the privilege of being with you at this assembly. For my first number, I would I would like to let's see here. Bishop Candia, I appreciated your sermon as well too, but I have a concern. The name of your synod is Central States. See, and I always thought of Nebraska and Iowa as the central states. Don't you think? She's over there. No. Okay. Kansas and Missouri. Wow. So your staff, you have a wonderful staff here. Gave me this lovely gift this morning. It's a ukulele. If you've never seen one before, I've never played a ukulele before, so this will be my debut performance. And I looked up the tuning, and it's a little bit different, and I would have to learn some new fingerings. So what I decided to do instead was tune it like the bottom 4 strings of a guitar. Which I do know how to play, so it makes it a little bit easier. And so I'd like to introduce our theme song for this event. Perhaps you remember it, some of you that are more my age or so, from Vacation Bible School back in the day. Jesus wants me for a sunbeam. Do you remember that? Anybody remember that? How many remember that song? Oh my gosh! More people than I thought. Okay. Well, I grew up in Michigan, so apparently it made it all the way to the Central States. I mean, sorry, just kidding. Oh gosh, let's see if we can remember this. You may have to help me out with it. Jesus wants me for a sunbeam to shine on each day, in every please him. And at home, at school, at play, or at work, at play? Home. Well, either one. You can substitute whatever you need there. Okay. Then how's it go? A sunbeam, Jesus wants me for a sunbeam, a sunbeam, a sunbeam. I'll be a sunbeam for. Okay, so now those of you that are hearing this song for the first time, how hard could it be? Aren't there emotions? Wasn't there something you're supposed to go, sunbeam, a sunbeam? It's amazing how, think about this for a minute, seriously, how Vacation Bible School worms its way into your subconsciousness. I mean, I can still remember the red Kool-Aid. I still remember the cookies. I remember love, just a little bit of love. So many of those good songs that became part of my faith. Even as simple as they were. Anyway, let's just try this one more time, and then we'll get to the planting our gardens together. A sunbeam, Jesus wants me for a sunbeam, a sunbeam, a sunbeam. I'll be a sunbeam for you. Thank you for that reminder. That was very nice. Give yourselves a round of applause. That was lovely. And thank you for the mandolin. I really appreciate it. It's warm up here. I'm gonna take this off. But if my wife calls, tell her I did wear the suit. Your theme verse is from the Sermon on the Mount, which is one of the most powerful passages. I remember hearing that as a child and having the impact that it had on me. Don't worry about your life, what you'll eat, what you'll drink, what you wear. Your Heavenly Father knows. Don't worry about tomorrow. Let tomorrow worry about itself. Consider the lilies of the field. They neither toil nor spin, and yet Solomon in all his glory was never arrayed like one of these. Consider the birds of the air. They don't plant or sow or gather into barns, and yet God takes care of it. It's good stuff. And then this passage about no one takes a light, puts a lamp and then puts it under a bushel basket. He had not met Lutherans yet. But I mean, if you think about it, there's a joke that goes, I shouldn't go off script. This is so dangerous. Oh yeah. What do you get when you cross a Jehovah's Witness and a Lutheran? Someone who knocks on your door and has absolutely nothing to say. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I remember. Yeah. Okay. That's enough. All right. I'm supposed to get my clicker out here, and it was with my banana. So let me see if it's in here. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about letting our lights shine, especially in this post-pandemic era as congregations. We've been through so much. We're all a little bit traumatized. But I'm going to start by introducing myself and let's see, on and, ooh, I have a laser. That's cool. That's all right. I like this. Let's see. Okay, that's me as a young child. I was a music student early on. My mom would sit down at the piano and she'd play the piano and just let me play along with her. And I fell in love with it. And she didn't worry about the right notes. And I think there's a lesson to be learned in that. And I grew up absolutely loving the piano. They said I can't quite get it to. They said I might have to hold my foot like this, and there it goes. All right, there's my mom with the pot on her head. Yeah, right. That's the '60s. And my dad, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's Pastor Milky. And I was also baptized at a young age. And that's my brother, the interloper, who came along a little bit afterwards being baptized. My dad was a pastor. He was a mission developer that had a profound effect on my life. I grew up in a church where we were setting up chairs every Sunday and knocking on doors. And I'm not suggesting that knocking on doors is the new wave, but what I'm saying is there was some real mission energy in that congregation. And I grew up with that and people of faith that surrounded me. And that was a huge part of my own faith development. So it's pretty important to me. And then my sister came along And then let's see what else. Just introducing myself here. I fell in love with the Bible early on at an early age too. I talked about the Sermon on the Mount and that impact. My parents gave me this Harper Study Bible when I was a kid. Probably some of you had one of those too. And we would highlight passages and so forth, and that was kind of cool. Then I went to Valparaiso University, and this is a fraternity choir that I directed, which was a lot of fun. And then in seminary, we had a band, pop-up band, and we just have a lot of fun playing. That's me in the back playing the bass, which is kind of like a large ukulele if you think about it, right? So now I've just added another instrument to my repertoire thanks to the Nebraska Synod. You guys rock. And then I met the love of my life, as you can see, and we've been 34 years. I hope you didn't see that hesitation if you're live streaming. Started teaching guitar. My first call was in Davenport, Iowa. I was there for 6 years. Fell in love with that. And by the way, I detasseled in Nebraska, so I learned a thing or two from y'all. Work ethic, man, that is hard work. Oh my gosh, I thought I was a hard worker until I came to Nebraska, and then our first son was born. His name is John. He's 29 years old now. And then we adopted our daughter from Russia, which is why I cannot take any credit for my granddaughter's looks. Different genetic pool altogether. But my granddaughter's now almost that age. It's kind of interesting. That was her in the orphanage. And then I served a parish in Texas for 10 years, and then I came to an assembly like this and did not intend to be bishop by any means, was not running, if anyone runs for the position, but I knew my name was going to be thrown in the hat. And so I called the bishop and we had breakfast, and I said, "What do you do exactly? Help me on kind of, I mean, what's the job? You know, this is an odd thing. I mean, you're in a sense, you are the call committee for this group of people. And I liked my call. I was enjoying my parish call. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to, what if I didn't like the job? What was a bunch of administration? And there is some administrative stuff, but I learned that there's also a preaching and teaching call that goes along with this call that is near and dear to my heart. So I left my name in the hat because the bishop said, remain open. And my wife said, the only reason you would pull your name out of the hat is if you're going to say, if elected, I am unwilling to serve. And I prayed about that hard. Am I unwilling to serve? Because I have pulled my name out. Because I went to the church-wide assembly and they put my name in the hat, and I had no trouble at all going to the front. I was one of the first people in the line to remove my name from the hat because I just knew I wasn't called to that role. But this I couldn't, as synod bishop, I couldn't say no, and I didn't think I was going to get elected. Anyway, first ballot, I was like 16 down on the list, and I called my wife and I said, "Don't bother coming, this isn't happening." And I went to the pool. It was nice. Oh, golly. And the thing is, they kept electing and electing and electing and electing, and then at the end of the day, my name was on the list, and I was shell shocked. And the bishop was motioning me to come to the front of the stage. The Houston Chronicle's out taking photographs, and somebody shoved a giant yellow duck stuffed animal into my hands, and I was so stunned I carried it up on the stage. So I was standing there. Yeah. I was like, my picture in the Houston Chronicle, I'm clutching an enormous stuffed duck. It was just, oh man. And I had not prepared a speech, so I did the only thing I knew how to do, and that was pray. And said, and I thought about, Luther's sacristy prayer and the Pope's prayer, "This is your church, I'm going to bed now." And I remember John Anderson was one of the first bishops to contact me, and he said, "The Spirit who has called you to this work will equip you for the work that God has called you to do." And I really believe that that's absolutely true. And I think I was naive and young and not as prepared as I could be for it. And yet the Spirit and your colleagues gather around you. And so those of you that are letting your name go forward, thank you for being open to the process. Some ways it's gut wrenching. Yeah, it's harder than it should be, but I thank you for remaining open, and thank you for the process. I've been praying for you. You've been praying. The whole thing's been bathed in prayer, and I think that is vitally important. All right, let me just keep going. It's fun being bishop. Really, No downsides whatsoever. This year, during the pandemic, I turned 60 and became a grandpa. And I'll see, isn't she cute? I see, he was right. And I'll tell you, if you give me enough time, I could come up with lots of grandchild photos for you. We could do this for hours. Um, she's very gifted. She can stick her entire fist into her mouth. She's definitely going places. Um, so a little bit about my context where I serve. I serve the Texas-Louisiana Gulf Coast Synod. And you can see that we have the lower half of Louisiana on the right there, and then a small patch of southeast Texas. There are two other synods in Texas. Well, three if you include El Paso as part of the Rocky Mountain Synod. And yet, if you look at the distribution of congregations, they're mostly on the Texas side. Louisiana is very Catholic. Texas is also very Catholic and also very Baptist on the north side of it as well, too. But there was some strong immigration into Galveston, so you get a sense of that. There are only about 14 congregations in southern Louisiana, but it's good to be on the Gulf of Mexico. That's really cool. There's some wildlife you have to be a little bit worried about in the Gulf Coast. I'm just saying. We have hurricanes, and that is an ongoing issue. We had two of them during the pandemic that destroyed churches, and that's a really hard thing. This congregation, the congregation still exists. The building does not. They really struggled after the hurricane. Unfortunately, that's Christ the King in Houston. We also have in Houston, as you know, the Space Center and the largest church in the country, Lakewood Church. And yes, I did preach there. It was an ecumenical event. It wasn't a Sunday morning. Joel wasn't even there. I'm sorry. But it was fun. It was a hoot to be up on the stage with his mom and others. We're also the home of Bluebell Ice Cream and Cafe Du Monde and all those good things that you know. We've got a lot of fun pastors in the Gulf Coast Synod and people and super pastors. We have super pastors in our synod as well too. This was an ordination in a brewery. It's allowed. You can get ordained anywhere, down by the riverside, you name it. And this congregation was the building was too small for the ordination. They always held this fundraiser, beer and hymns. You're doing a beer and hymns tonight, right? Yeah. What's that? Brews and hymns. Sorry. So yes. So you're inclusive. That's nice. They always did this fundraiser, and so the ordinand came to me and with his hat in his hand said, "Can we have it at St. Arnold's Brewery?" And I said, "Well, yeah, of course. St. Arnold is the patron saint of brewers, so that makes perfectly sense." So that was really fun, and it's fairly open synod to all kinds of stuff. We have a great staff, a much smaller staff than you have. Our synod assembly is about a third of the size of your synod assembly. We like to say Lutherans are denser up here. We have two companion synods. Like most synods have companion synods. So Central African Republic, which has been in constant conflict for the last 10 years and even beyond, one of the poorest countries in the world, and also the Lutheran Church in Peru, which is closer and easier to travel and absolutely gorgeous. Come with us sometime. It's allowed. Also the home of the ELCA Youth Gathering like 4 times. And I think you're coming again here pretty soon, both in that was in Houston, but also in the Superdome. It will be coming up. Okay, I want to talk about planting our gardens together after a few very difficult years, because the question I get asked the most is, how is the synod going? And I want to say to you, it feels a lot like somebody asked me, how's the garden? Because we've been through so very much. Now we've had Easter, and that felt good. Like I said, this room feels good. I sat in the back for a while, and boy, there's just kind of a fun, effusive spirit, and then people are happy to be together again. And I can feel it here, and I also know that this is an important, sacred time as you choose your next leader. And so I really do appreciate being involved with this. But of course, we had the pandemic, right? And then we had a number of racially based shootings that were very difficult situations to come through. We had, oh gosh, yeah. So I mean, you know where we've been together, right? Absolutely. And in our neck of the woods, that meant a couple of hurricanes as well too, and the kind of destruction that comes with that. That's St. Paul Lutheran Church in Lake Charles, Louisiana. They're not going to replace that sanctuary. They decided they're going to build a multi-purpose space and also use it as a food pantry and a community meeting area. So it's really kind of clever what we said, don't just put it back the way it was. Think about what your mission and calling is and say, if you can now create something new, let's think about what that new needs to look like. And then we had this thing called a freeze. Perhaps you've heard of them. And I know this looks like a joke to you because I grew up in Michigan, I lived in Iowa, but for us, where we're not winterized, it meant that all of our electricity generating windmills froze up, and I mean, it was a bad time, and our pipes froze and burst. Fire suppressant systems on 2-3 levels of churches. We had a dozen churches with catastrophic flooding. The insurance companies do not like us right now. But through all that we've been through together, think about what you did. I mean, we talk about innovation in ministry like it's so very, very, very difficult. But that pandemic hit, I don't know, what was it, March 15, 20, somewhere around in there. A week later, most of our churches were online. 1 week. 1 week, we did what I couldn't have gotten done in a 6-year term as bishop in our synod. If I'd said, I want every congregation online by the end of my 6-year term, it would have been next to impossible. Look what happened because of the crisis. And then in the months later, I'm willing to bet that 90-something% of you went online, and many of you are still online, and there are new people that have heard. And in fact, Easter 2020, or was it Easter? Yeah, Easter 2020 or 2021, the largest worship attendance we've ever had in the church. More people online watching Easter services than have ever sat in our pews in the United States of America in a given set. So there's some things that came out of this. We can innovate. We can adapt. We don't have to do it the way we've always done it, and it's not a hopeless situation. Look at all the adaptation that went on during this time. We were before you. I mean, this is Lent 2020. We're already doing this kind of stuff. It's really quite amazing. See, you've all been there. You've been there. You know. And all kinds of creative. We learned about COVID life, and we learned about online life, and the kind of what happens on Zoom stays on Zoom. I love this one. It says, Mary, do you accept John as your lawfully wedded husband? If so, press enter. If not, press escape. Oh my goodness. The stuff we did online, right? I mean, just think about it a little bit. But the creativity of what happened and the connectivity of what happened afterwards. I mean, look at this kid at home worshiping in his bare feet in his Superman costume. This is great. This is absolutely great. Watching his pastor preach on TV. Church, we probably brought church home again. The church started in homes. It's probably where we need to go in many cases. We had first communions during the pandemic. We had, how did that get in there? I don't know. Let's see. Ordinations, yes, ordinations. And this is the ordination of Rudy. Are you in the room? Rudy, come on. Rudy, where is he? Where is he? Come on, stand up, man. Don't be chicken. I didn't warn him because I knew he wouldn't approve. Woo! All right, there he is. Woo! All right, Rudy Trevino Flores. And Rudy is a gift from the Gulf Coast Synod to you. Thank you very much. Make me proud, man. All right, so we had communion, sort of, I used to make fun of these things before the pandemic, but they turned out to be pretty helpful, didn't they? The question I get asked the most is, how's the church doing? And my analogy has come to be, it's like asking me, what does your garden look like in January? This is actually February in Texas. Sorry, no offense. But I mean, this was after the winter freeze. And I mean, you can see everything is pretty much dead. Except for maybe you can see the little green growing around the base. Those are not weeds. Those are Easter lilies. So even in the death of everything in my yard, and I have a yard that generally comes back up every year, and everything died, cost us a fortune. But there's hope. There's the Easter lilies. Those Easter lilies came back, and spoiler alert. Oh gosh, that's the maybe. Do I have a spoiler alert? Maybe not. Can I get this? There we go. Okay, yeah, there they are. That's foxtail on the right-hand side, looks dead as a doornail, right? But then there's the Easter lilies coming up, and this is what they look like. Okay, now notice where the arrows are. There's little green spikes coming up out of it. And a friend said, no, 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 don't kill it, don't dig it up. Wait and see. Watch. Trust. God does what God does. You might be surprised. And I was, because, and this is just a spoiler, that's the same spot right there. Now you can see the foxtail in the front. You can see that the Easter lilies are about to open up, and they're coming along. I planted some marigolds, and it's called Dusty Miller, the white stuff right there. And that's how it looked by May. That's that same spot. I thought it was dead. We had our congregations empty. I preached to empty sanctuaries, and everybody wondered, will they ever come back? Now that they've had a taste of worshiping in their jammies, I mean, it got pretty rough there for a while. On Sundays when I had to preach, my wife and I, in our pajamas and with our coffee, and thinking about maybe going to get the laptop and bringing it to bed. I don't know. I've never worshipped in bed before. But look at how we came back. I mean, look at last Easter. Wasn't it good to have people back and start to feel like things are coming back? Now, what I want to say is, not everything will necessarily come back. That big tree right there and the one behind it, those are blueberry trees, and they did not make it. A neighbor who's a master gardener said, just cut a couple of the branches, and if there's any green in it, you might have hope. If there's not, it's done. And it was done. They're not coming back. And there are some of our people that are not going to come back. They're just not going to come back. And that's okay. Some of them passed away during the pandemic. I mean, I'm sure you have some very, very difficult stories to tell, and there's a lot of grief out there of people that didn't make it through it. We have a pastor in our synod, Adriana Johnson Rivas. Her sister died in the car on the way to the hospital. I mean, the president of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Peru passed away from COVID in 2021. Some people are not going to be coming back to our congregations except for the communion of saints. And there's some who moved away, some who fell away for whatever reason. And you know what? That's not that abnormal. That happens in any given year. There are people who are going to pass away. There are people who are going to move away. There are people who are going to fade away. That's going to happen in any congregation. So we need to be constantly renewing and asking, how do we replant our gardens for a new season of ministry? So what I'm going to be talking to you today and tomorrow a little bit about is just, I want to invite you to think together about what it means to plant a garden, and to think of your congregation as a garden that is going to be planted as we move forward. And that's going to involve prayer, planting, watering, feeding, weeding, and a couple other things. And what does that mean for us? I want you to have a little bit of hope. And when I was here for the leadership event that your pastors and deacons were at in the fall, we talked about leading in liminal space. But I think we're in a different place now than we were last year. I think we're in a place now where it's time to plant for a new season so that we can have a harvest in the fall. So what does that look like? I think we have a little bit of a better idea. We aren't out of the pandemic yet. There's actually an uptick in hospitalizations in the country right now. We have to continue to be careful. But we're not in the same place that we were before. And so now, how are we going to prepare for a new season? So I want to start with prayer, because I think that's where we always want to start. Am I going backwards? Right, that's right. My verse for this is Isaiah 40, which I just love, that God gives power to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Why don't we read this together? It's good. Let's start from the top. God gives power to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Even youth will faint and grow weary, and the young will fall exhausted. But those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. That God gives strength to the weak. That's the promise of the Spirit, and that we need to learn to wait on the Lord for that strength. And I want to say that this Sunday in Pentecost is part of that as well too. At the Ascension, which we had last week, Jesus gives the disciples three instructions. Wait here, be clothed with power from on high, and then you will be my witnesses. Wait here until you are clothed with power from on high. And sometimes we don't do that. We go rushing into the situation with our great ideas rather than stepping back and praying. And you've been bathing this process in prayer. I've watched it online. I've watched it here at the assembly as you've prayed before each time. And we need to be a people of prayer. And prayer is more than just now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep, and if I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take, right? And that's kind of what we grow up thinking prayer. I don't know who thought that was a good idea for children at bedtime. If I die before I wake, pray the Lord my soul to take. Night, kids. See you in the morning. Yeah. Wow. But there it is. I think that if prayer is talking to God, it better be at least 50% listening. And that means that we can listen. You can pray while you're working. The 4th century Egyptian monks taught us that. You can pray while you're walking. You can pray while you're talking. You can pray while you're driving. There's lots of ways for you. Reading scripture is a form of prayer. I'm so passionate about this. I wrote a book about it. It's out there. This will be my only shameless plug. You can have that book. It's on Amazon. It's $14.99, but I'll give it to you for the Nebraska price of $20. And then, seriously, and if you don't have, you might take one, because I really believe that the church is called to prayer. That's what distinguishes us in many ways from other communities, is that we are called. And I think it's what gets our church in trouble when we don't. When God's people don't come together and say, let's take a moment and just reflect with scripture and prayer and silence at home. Make up prayer tent cards for your families to put on their kitchen tables at home, which teaches them to pray and invites them to pray. And if you're praying about your future of your congregation, take the month of June and pray about the future of your congregation. Write a prayer, staff or council, write a prayer. Pray it every Sunday in church. Put it on tent cards, send it home. Get people praying, and then get them talking with one another. And the Spirit will stir stuff up in your congregation. And when you turn up the heat, something will happen. I guarantee you something will happen. May not be what you think is going to happen, but something will happen, because the word goes out and it always accomplishes that for which it is purposed. The word always goes out and does something, and we need to rely on it. Paul called the word a dunamis. The Greek word that we get, from which we get our word dynamite, an explosive power in people's lives. It does stuff. That creative word created the world at the beginning of time. God spoke creation into existence, and it does stuff in our congregations. If we will dwell on the word, if we will pray together as God's people, stuff will happen. I guarantee it. So pray about it in your prayers. Send home cards, do whatever you can to pray. Pray as a council. We used to choose our council members by praying. If you've ever been in a situation where you're like, oh gosh, who are we going to get on council? Tell them it's only 12 meetings. That's how I get people on the consultation committee. I tell them, this committee never meets. You have nothing to worry about. Famous last words. Yeah. That's what they said when I went to the bishop election in the Gulf Coast Synod. No, we would take, I would say, who are the leaders in our, what gifts do we need here on the council to complete the suite? And who are the people? And we pull out membership directories, photo directories. I don't know if you still have those or not. They're probably all online now. But at the time we had these on, and I would give them 5 minutes, flip through the directory, write down names of people that you think would be good. And then after that 5 minutes of silent prayer and reflection, we would put all the names up on the board and back behind us, and we would pray about it. And I'd say, tell me, and Pastor, I get a veto because there's stuff that I know that others don't know. Okay, I know that this person is going through some stuff that I can't talk about with them. So there'd be people that we would pull off the list and say, okay, we're not going to do this person because they're already on this committee. We really need them here, and we need their attention's not divided. Or they'd say, let them decide. Or, and we would kind of rule down a list. We'd pray about it together. We'd meet the next month after having prayed about it, and we'd talk about it. And then we would assign one person to ask each of the people that we thought we needed. And we almost got a yes every single time when we used a prayerful process for raising up leaders. So I really encourage us to think about prayers as the number one thing. Then, once you've prayed and you've come up with a plan, so you're going to be praying about, what does our ministry look like in the fall, and how do we prepare? How do we plant? How do we cultivate the soil and get ready for this new season of ministry? What is it going to look like? And we'll talk about that in a minute, but then we start planting. And I'll tell you what, whether you plant with seeds or seedlings, you just need to know those plants are fragile. When people come to the church for the first time in a long time, or sometimes ever, they are very fragile. Sometimes they've been wounded by the church. Maybe they grew up in a church where people kind of knew church was a place where adults fight. Some of them have never gone to church, but they've heard all the stuff that goes on in the Christian media, and they think that's what Christianity is. And so you have to start very gently with people. A bruised reed he will not break. When the way seems clear, start inviting. Your seedlings are your newcomers. And so I want to do an exercise for a second and ask you to think about this. Here's the question. Why do people look for churches? I know not everybody's looking for a church right now. We'll get to that in a minute. But for those who are looking for a church, somebody is church shopping, if you will. Why are they looking for a church? What are they looking for? What are they hoping for out of a church? And I'm going to give you a minute to think about this. If you have a pencil, write down as many ideas as you can think of why people are looking for a church. And then after I've given you a minute to do that, I'm going to invite you to share with the person next to you or in front of you or behind you or a couple people, whatever you want to do. And I want to come up with as many ideas together in a committee of 644, because that's fun, of why you think people might be looking for a church. All right? Everybody understand? Ready? Go. Serenade you while you wait. Somewhere over the rainbow. Okay. Anything goes. Craziest ideas in the world. Why do you think people are looking for a church? Maybe you were that person at one point. What were you looking for when you went looking for a church? Maybe you moved. Maybe you've been on church for a while. Okay, I want to invite you now to turn to somebody, anybody. It could be somebody from your church. That's always good. It could be somebody who's not from your church. That's good too. Cross-pollination. You know how that works. I detasseled. I know how it works. And share your ideas with that person. See if you got any similarities. Ready, go. Okay, come back together. Let me hear what you got. So some brave soul, give me a reason that people look for church. They moved, right? Absolutely. They just moved. They used to go to church where they were. They're coming to a new church now. Very good. Why else? Desperation. Yeah, that's right on multiple levels. For a correct answer to their problems. Yeah, sometimes that's true. Sometimes people are dealing with something in their lives. They're trying to solve a problem of some sort, and they're just looking for spiritual community or something. Somebody help me solve this. Sometimes it's a facile kind of give me the answer. Other times it's a deeper, I know I need to discern this, but I need to be around others to help me think through it. I need God's guidance, spiritual guidance. What else? Amen. Yep. We got a lot of grandkids in church. Yep. Or their spouse made them, or their parents made them. There's some people that are there under duress. Absolutely. So let's make it something for them so they can be surprised. What else? Oh, invitation. Somebody invited me. They said, "This is awesome. You need to come to it." That is that raving fans. That's what you want. I'm not sure how you get that. Probably not page 15, but you think about the kind of community that draws people. You had your hand up over here. There are a couple hands. Yes, ma'am. To belong. Yeah. And there's that's generational. How we belong for millennials is different than for veterans. But yes, absolutely. Yeah. I want my kids to grow up around people that have a love ethic and a work ethic and a gospel ethic. And yeah, thank you. What else? Say again? Yeah, changing religions. Yeah, absolutely. Some people will come because they've left a church in the community because of a conflict. Oh, yeah, that's right. You're all laughing. I once took a bunch of our pastors to the largest non-denominational church in our community because the pastor was a friend. And we sat down and they asked him a bunch of questions. And one of the questions they asked him, they said, "Have you started any new churches?" And he said, "Not intentionally." He didn't miss a beat, man. Yeah, that's the church we used to go to over there. Right, absolutely. I want to say that, was there something else? Okay, I thought I heard something. I want to say that a lot of times when people to your church for the first time, they're there because they need something. Maybe they're just divorced. Maybe they're going through a crisis in their life. Maybe they just moved, which is like one of the top stressors in the list of stressors. That's a very stressful situation. They're looking for community. They're looking for friends. Surveys of people say that the number one reason they're looking for a church is to make friends. We want them to have all these highfalutin spiritual principles, and many of them do, but they're just looking for friends. And here's the deal. Friends are a spiritual thing. That's an important thing. So the question then becomes, how do we build community? When I was on sabbatical, I went to a church of another denomination. I walked in the door and the usher, no eye contact, shoves a bullet in my face. I go sit in the pew. I sit through the whole service. Nobody says a word to me. When you get to the passing of the peace, everybody kind of passes the peace in their own little clique. And my family and I were staying by ourselves. Nobody came over to us. But I'm okay. I'm an extrovert. Not a problem. So I ran over to this group, and they're kind of huddled. There's about 6 of them. They're huddling, and they're talking about the game or whatever, which I think isn't what the piece is for, but that's okay. Anyway, they're talking about this stuff, and I said, "Hi, peace of Christ be with you." And they what they did is they went like this, they went, "Oh, hi, yeah, peace be with you," and like that, And then we walked to our car without saying hello to anybody but that person right there. And I thought, wow, okay, so if I'm coming looking for friends, I am not coming back to this church. Now, then I went to another church of another denomination, and I walked in the door, and before we could get to our pew, 7 people came over to us, and they didn't have big things that said greeter on them. They were just normal people, and they and they came over and they said, we're so glad. Okay, we stuck out because we're the only white people in the building, but it's easy to identify the visitors when you're a small church or when you're an ethnic specific church. But here's the deal: they showed me what hospitality should look like in the church. I have never experienced hospitality like that in a Lutheran church. That's not shame on you Lutherans. It's just the reality. I think it's somewhat cultural because of our immigrant backgrounds and some of the values that we came from our Scandinavian or Germanic backgrounds. I mean, someone once said to me, when you ask a Lutheran about their faith, they look at their shoes. Another person said, if you ask a Lutheran about their faith, they'll tell you about their church, which I think that's true a lot of times because we experience our faith in community. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if we're going to let our light shine, we have to be able to talk about the stuff that makes church so important. Why are you here today? Why are you a leader in your church? You're a leader in your church in some way, shape, or form, or you would not be here today. You're a leader because you're a Synod Assembly voting member. Congratulations. And you're now also a church planter. Congratulations. Because we are in a time when we're going to plant new churches. When Dad started that church in 1964, they knocked on like 10,000 doors. I can't remember exactly. I don't think that's the strategy today. I talked to a mission developer just last week who said we knocked on 5,000 doors and we got 1 member out of that process. There are better ways for us to do evangelism today. Probably so. You know your community because Nebraska is not Houston and Houston is not Birmingham. So you have to figure out what is in your community. Who lives within a 12-block radius around our church? What are we doing that's worth passing up whatever they're doing on Sunday morning? What you're doing on Sunday morning more important than taking my kids to the park? More important than sitting and reading the paper? Do they still have papers? Okay. Sitting and watching the 24-hour news cycle that brings my blood pressure up to here. You know, of course, there are things that we can do. We can help that blood pressure go down. We can put things in perspective. We can wrap current events in a loving community. We can help you raise your kids. There are lots of good things that we can do here, but the number one, just keep this in your mind, the number one thing that people are looking for is to make friends. And we live in increasingly diverse communities as well, too. So when they come in the door, and this is the problem with our congregations, is oftentimes we're like, you are welcome here as long as you become like us. You worship like us, you sit like us, you dress like us, you think like us, you organize like us, and you theologize like us. And this is going to require, the planting that we need is going to require kind of digging up the soil a little bit and loosening it up, shaking it up a little bit so that roots can grow and newcomers can come in. I have some new plants in my garden that I didn't have a year ago because of the shakeup that we had. And we've had a shakeup. Don't put it back the way it was. Rethink. We did a survey in the last congregation I served. We had a year where we had a record number of people join the church. And so we were really curious. And so we sent a survey to every one of them. They said 2 questions. 1, why did you visit this church for the first time? Number 2 was, why did you stay? Why did you join? And I was surprised by the answers. I mean, a little bit. The first answer was, why did you come? What do you think they said? I was invited by a friend. The number one reason that people will visit your church is they're invited by a friend. And if that is thrown on the pastor's shoulders, you're in trouble because the pastor only has 2 friends. I'm just Oh, I heard one young pastor say, the miracle wasn't the feeding of the 5,000. The miracle was Jesus was in his 30s and he had 12 friends. Oh my gosh, it was so hard. I graduated from seminary where I'm surrounded by all these people that are my age and they love the Bible like I love the Bible and they love theology and they love the church. And then I went into the church and everybody was older than me and there weren't that many people my own age. It was a really, it was a struggle. People are looking for friends. Invite people to your church. So the number one reason is somebody invited me. And so we have to equip people to do it. So we started printing up business cards with our Christmas services on it and we passed them out to people all during Advent. And we said, take as many of these as you want and give them to your friends and invite them to come to church with you. And you know what surveys say the response rate is if you invite someone to church? 80% will say yes. Salespeople would love to have those odds. 80% will say yes. They may not want to come, but they'll say yes. And some of them will want to come. They'll be honored that you invited them, even if they're a little bit nervous about it, even if they haven't stepped foot in a church in a long time. And you have to think about that. How do people enter your church if they're completely unchurched and they've never been there before? What is it like? Does it feel safe to them? Are they going to get a warm welcome? Are they going to be embarrassed if they don't know how to do communion? There are people that come to church and they don't know what you're drunk with all that bread and those styrofoam discs. One of my favorite C.S. Lewis quotes, he says, "I find it easier to believe that it's the body of Christ than to believe it's actually bread." I'm not making a theological statement. If you use wafers, God bless you, it's a great thing. And if you use bread, God bless you, it's a great thing. But it's kind of fun. People don't know what's going on. So are they going to be embarrassed? And this is always the hardest part. When somebody's in there, they're not sure they're going to go up for communion or not. And all of a sudden an usher comes and goes like this and stares at you. And then you're thinking, I'm not going to go. But then there's two people standing on the right side of you who are standing up going, get out of the way. I have to go take communion. You know, and you're like, what do I do? So how do we not embarrass the visitors? I'm not a big fan of, oh, I see some newcomers over there. If you're an introvert or socially anxious in any way, that's terror right there. Don't do that to people. Don't treat them like they've been members for 1,000 years. And by the way, if they have been members and they haven't been there for a long time, oh, look who's here. No. It needs to be a prodigal son moment. You go running off the porch, hike up your robes, and you run out and you greet them with hugs and kisses and say, I missed you so much. So glad you're back. That's the moment that we need at those times. So inviting your friends. The second most common response that we got in our community was drive-by. We drove by your church and we saw it there. When we saw that, we put a big cross out in front because it made us a little bit more visible. We're on a 7-lane highway now. Not everybody's like that. Some of you are buried in the back of a neighborhood. It's not going to be like that for you. But you need to figure out how the people who have come, how did they get there? Why did they come? And how do we spin that up a little bit and make it known? Nobody mentioned, this was 15 years ago. Nobody mentioned the Yellow Pages ad or the newspaper ad or any of that stuff. Meant nothing. And here's the deal. Today, your web page is your front door. 90% of the people who visit your church will visit your webpage first. That's the first visit they're going to get about you. So what's on that page is going to tell them something about you, and it's going to help them decide whether they're going to come or not. Because they're going to look at that page to find out where your church is. They're going to look at that page to see what you look like. They might even watch a sermon or two. They might listen to 2 or 3 sermons by the time they show up in church for the first time. You just don't know. They're going to need to know where your service times are. Drives me crazy. I go to a church webpage and I cannot find when the services are or where it's located. So make sure that that's up front. And pictures. Don't show me a picture of your pretty building or your empty building. Show me faces of people. That's why I'm coming to church. I'm not coming to church for an empty building. And make sure that webpage says you are welcome here in some way, in every possible way, shape, or form. And then you got to make it so when they arrive. So another exercise. How do you get people in your front door? Jesus drew a crowd. So let's talk for a second just about ways to draw a crowd. Take a couple of minutes and think about this. Again, we'll do the list thing. And if you're not a writer, don't write. But I like to write. It helps me focus. Because look, a bird. It helps me to stay focused on what I'm doing. Top 10 ways you could draw a crowd to your church sometime this summer or in the fall. I don't care. Whatever makes you happy. Think about that a little bit. 10 ways. Not 1, not 2, not 3. 10 ways. If you need help, turn to your neighbor and I'll serenade you while you do this. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them too, for me and you. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world. this is nice. Okay, is that enough time? How many need more time? All right, good. Seeing nobody coming to the microphones, I love saying that. Because usually when I say that, someone does. That's just how it works. I posted that picture of Bishop Moss on my Facebook page, my personal and my professional Facebook page, if you want to grab it and use it for your own edification, help yourself. I'll also, hey, by the way, I'll also do a blog post with some of these thoughts and a few photos, either tonight or tomorrow night, as soon as I can get to it. I'm at bishopmike.com. That's my blog. It's really easy to remember, right? bishopmike.com. Super easy to find. Yeah, so tell me, don't give me all the time, just give me one. Somebody, some brave soul, tell me, how are you going to draw a crowd at your church? Wow, okay. Let's do that again in slow motion. What? A balloon? Food! Oh my gosh, yes. That's right, the feeding of the 5,000, right? Okay, so yeah, I usually end with this, but we'll start with that. I'll tell you what, if you want to get Texans to go anywhere, put a sign in your front yard that says free barbecue. That's all it takes, especially if you've got something cooking and they can smell it from wherever. If you're in a neighborhood and you have a pig roast or a rib roast or brisket or whatever, people will come for miles. Now, you can sell it if you want to and do it as a fundraiser for your church. The challenge with that is it appears to the community as a little bit self-serving. We're just raising money so that we can get new carpet kind of thing. But if you can't, sometimes you got to charge. What we did a lot of times is we would put out a gift basket. We were really lucky. In my last church, we had a guy who would buy all the food and then put out a gift basket, and he would donate the food, and then the gift basket would go into an endowment fund to help college kids from our congregation. It was really he was a generous soul, and boy, what a touching thing. So yeah, food, absolutely a huge draw. I tell people, drawing a crowd, this is not going to be your problem. Your problem will be keeping them. You're drawing a crowd. Just put a sign that says free beer on the front yard of your church, and you will have a crowd. It's amazing. These churches, even we have churches in our community that do a chicken fry, and they have their chicken fry, and they will charge $15 a plate, and they're lined up out the door for $15 a plate. But they're lined up out the door, and then they keep going. So the question is, how do we create community? How do we have children's events? We used to have an event where we would do a barbecue, and I would rent a climbing wall. You can rent these climbing walls. They pull them out in a trailer, and they spring them up like that. And we put that thing out so you could see it from the road. And people would see these kids climbing up there, and we'd have balloons and all kinds of stuff around. And that looks like fun. Something fun for me and my kids to do in a family-friendly, safe environment, and it smells really good. Let's go see what that's about. And if you do it with consistency on a regular basis, people will pick up on it and start coming. Is it a lot of work? Heck yes. But it's a lot of fun too. And it's a good memory thing. What else? Funerals. Oh, thank you for saying that. That does draw a crowd. No, I'm totally serious. I put this down. I'm telling you, this is in my list. Did I create a list? I don't want to show you the list yet because I want to hear what you have to say. Funerals is on my list because, if I had a dime for every time someone said, Pastor, you do a good funeral. I thought that was a really funny thing to say, but here's the deal. If you care for people in those moments, that gets around the community. They loved us, they cared for us, and here's the deal. We stopped charging. When I came to this church, the pastor had a $250 honorarium for funerals. And if you keep doing that, that's fine. The pastor deserves their wages, but they said, we're going to make sure you're paid well enough so that you don't have to do that anymore because we don't want to have to chase people down for money after a funeral. They're grieving. You don't want that phone call to be, where's my money? You want to be, how are you doing? This is really hard. And that follow-up ministry after the funeral was absolutely critical. We would sit down after the funeral and we'd say, okay, Betty's husband died. What are going to be the important days over the next year for her? Their anniversary, his birthday, Father's Day, Easter, his death day. And we kind of made a list and we put them in the calendar. We'd say, somebody got to call that person on that day. And keeping track of that calendar helped because if she shows up on an important day and I miss it, I miss a great opportunity. But if I get it right, the tear down the face says, somebody cares about me, somebody remembers, somebody knows, somebody loves me. That's really, really important. That's for a member of the community, obviously, but even those outside the community. My dad used to say, I will bury anybody. I will never miss an opportunity to preach the gospel. He was a burying Sam. And it was a ministry. And for weddings can be that way too. That would never really worked for me. I wasn't great at weddings, like I was at funerals for some reason. And those were hard times for me in some ways. But I have friends who have gotten many members out of opening their doors for weddings. And there's some churches that say, nope, we're only going to marry people who are members of our church because the pastor would spend every Friday and Saturday night all year doing weddings, and we don't want that. And so maybe that's not viable in your community. But in ours, we were able to do that. And I also went to the funeral home. I'm switching back and forth. But I went to the funeral home and I told them, if you ever have anybody who comes here and they can't afford a pastor, I will come for free. And I got paid half the time. But I told them, I will charge you absolutely nothing to come back. I'm only here for no other reason than to walk alongside you at this very, very difficult moment in your life. And we cared for people. That's a great ministry. Great ministry. What else? Open house. Sure. Let them know. Have food. What for kids in the parking lot? Oh, yeah, bouncy house. Okay, yeah, the bouncy house. So, yeah, what event are you going to have your bouncy house and your climbing wall at this year? Think about that a little bit. Work on it. I'm sure that somebody here, I'm not sure. I'm sure somebody here in Kearney has a bouncy house, and somebody here in Kearney probably has a portable climbing wall, and maybe not. You got to figure out what works in your neck of the woods. Hayride or whatever it's going to be in your community that's going to help people feel like they have something fun to bring their kids to that really makes a difference. In the parking lot made me think of trunk or treat. Those are big draws nowadays, especially if you have a big building. And we had a gymnasium, and if it rained on Halloween, even the kids that would normally be doing their neighborhood would come to us, and we'd set up tables and have things and have games and food and hot dogs for the adults. And then adults get to meet friends, and they're like, wow, there's other people here. Wow, this is kind of nice. They have kids my age. Let's think about staying. That doesn't mean they're going to join your church, but listen, nobody's going to join your church without visiting first. I'll bet you anything. Nobody. Well, you know what? That's not anymore. We have a church that had 44 people join in Houston during the pandemic, and some of them had never been in the building. They had only worshiped online, and they joined the church online. It's a new world. So a lot of my shibboleths are out now, but most people are not going to join your church without visiting first. So the question is, how do we fish for people? I know I'm mixing metaphors between gardening and fishing, but nevertheless, how do we bury the fish in the ground so the plant grows up? All right, no, that's not going to work. But how do you invite people to be part? And I'm not saying you have to do this every week, but maybe 3 or 4 times a year, have some kind of seminal event. What other things? Concerts and special music. Yes, thank you so much. You bring in some kind of an artist. We created a coffee house on Friday nights for kids at one point in one congregation I served. Depending upon the community, I know Ashley Christ the King has the Bach Festival that brings a crowd on a regular basis. You can bring somebody like Dakota Road out. We've brought. Well, I mean, the kinds of musicians that are kind of fun to have, and then have them stay and play on Sunday morning as well, too. About that a little bit. What else? Movie night, VBS, yes, movie night. Yeah, we did this. Even the pandemic, we did this. The pastor put huge sheet hung up in the church and the projector, and people pulled up in their cars, and they had a playing area for kids, and they watched some family-friendly movie. I don't know. Finding Nemo or something like that. That was really, really fun. And in the middle of a pandemic, it was okay to be outside, so that kind of worked. What was the other thing you said? Oh yeah, VBS. It still works. People are looking for childcare, especially during the summer, if their situation has changed. Think about that. It's harder than it used to be because the people that used to staff the VBS are now working. When I was a kid, it was the moms that ran VBS, the at-home moms. Well, there aren't as many at-home moms as there used to be. We're all in the workforce, so it's a bigger challenge. Camps can be a big help for that. Camp Hope, Camp Hope is a system where you have high schoolers and college-age students that are leading the VBS. They run the VBS, so it's both mentoring young people and also doing faith development for children. What else? Community service. Oh my gosh, yes. Wow, and we would do these events, like we're building a habitat house across town, and we just put it everywhere. Come and help us. Half the people would be non-members. I had people come up from the congregation and say, "Hey, my next door neighbor is not a member. Is it okay if I invite him?" I'm like, "Yes, yes." We had the same thing with small groups. We would just, I'll come to small groups in a second, but yes, absolutely. Service projects in the community, because when people see the church doing stuff that the church ought to be doing, it makes a huge difference in their lives. They look at it and they go, wow, I want to be a part of that. I may not even believe in God. I had one guy who was Buddhist who started coming on a regular basis, and he'd sit in the front pew and meditate during the worship service. But he had great comments about my sermons afterwards, so I knew he was listening. He had not tuned me out. And he would challenge me at times as well, too. And all those reluctant husbands and great-grandkids, think about what's your message of your sermon for those people there. Who are you preaching to? Who's in your panel, pastors and deacons, when you're out there preaching? What kind of stuff do you have for them? They may be dragged along kicking and screaming. And what happens is if they come to enough service projects, they might want to see what you're doing on Sunday morning and be a part of that as well, too. And so our message is oftentimes, I know as a pastor, I was my first season of ministry, I was preaching to my preaching professors. Even 6 years out of seminary, I still saw them in the back pew looking at me going, I was preaching my sermons for them. And then I started preaching them for myself. And then I found myself preaching them for the leaders in my congregation because I needed to boast for my leaders. But then I started thinking, what would happen if I preached for the unchurched person who walked in the door? And I made eye contact with that visitor. And I said, okay, you may already know all this, but this person right here needs to hear this message. And I can tell by the way they nod that they're tracking with me. And so I'm going to go that direction. Luther said, I preach to the children and the handmaidens. And if the doctors of the church, of which there are over 50 in my congregation, don't approve, the door is open. That's a direct quote. I don't know where it is. I could find it, though. I read it myself. When I read it, I laughed out loud. It's fantastic. It might be on my blog. Somebody can do a search. What else? Outdoor worship services, yeah. Doesn't work in Texas when it's 100 degrees, but in your neck of the woods, maybe in January, yeah. But here, yeah. I remember, yeah, in Iowa, when I had parish in Iowa, we would do a service in the park across the street, and people would come in there jogging stuff, and it was really kind of cool. That can be really appealing, and or do one service in the park. And I know for some, canceling your Sunday morning insight is difficult, but for others it isn't. Have it there. We did this during Lent, during the pandemic. We had Lenten services at the park. It was really fun. We had people from the park just stroll up and sit down and participate in Lenten service. We did Marty Haugen's evening prayer in the park. And afterwards, we had watermelon and all kinds of stuff. And the kids came around, and there were people that came to visit our church after the pandemic who had connected with us in the park. That's a great idea. Thank you. What else? What's that? Bloodmobile. Yeah. We have the Bloodmobile out every once in a while, too. Yep, that's how we help. Yeah, and so put it on your front lawn so that you're not just getting your folks. Okay, I want to say something about small groups real quick, and that is people are looking for community, and sometimes walking into a formal religious worship service is not the entry point for them, but they could go to somebody's house. A friend invites them. So we would always be doing some kind of a book study. We ended up doing one in Lent, one in the summer, and one every fall. And we'd try and pick something that was pretty accessible. We'd do an all congregation books study or whatever it was that we were studying at that given time. And everybody would buy the book, and we would divide up into small groups. And at one point we had 22 small groups because we had 3, and I wanted to have 10, and the council said, let's have 20. So and the thing is, you have as many small groups as you have small group leaders. So it was all about leadership. It's all about recruiting. So we found 22. Actually, we had to find 44 because we wanted them in teams of 2. We wanted one person who would provide their house and another person who would lead, because it's very hard to lead and be host at the same time. And so we ended up with 44 people. We had 22 small groups. We put them all on a piece of paper in the narthex, and we said, sign up for a group. And we had people recruit for their own group if they were leaders. And some of those groups filled up just like that. Some of them did not fill up. They come to me and say, what do I do? And I said, open the doors in the highways and the byways and invite the riffraff in. And some of them would come to me and say, hey, my neighbors want to come to this Bible study. Is that okay? Yes! That's what this is about. I think we have to kind of convince our people that the idea is to welcome the community, to be a part of what we're doing here in the world, because we want to be a part of what God is doing in the world. And so those small groups became the place. Some of them never came to church, but many of them did, especially if you're studying the book and you know the pastor on Sunday is going to be preaching on the topic that you just read about this past week. And then do a big thing at the end. And a lot of those groups continue. Now, half of all small groups will fail within a year. That's okay. It just means you got to plant twice as many groups. And for some people, that small group is going to be a safer place to talk about. And I think that's where evangelism is done as well, too. We like to think of evangelism as one-on-one, somebody twisting somebody else's arm. But I don't think so. I think what happens is somebody comes to a neighborhood book study, and all of a sudden they're surrounded by neighbors, and their kids are playing together, and maybe you get a babysitter who kind of watch the kids in the backyard while you're having your book study, and then you have a little bit of food, and they get to eat together, and they're looking for friends. They're looking for community, and there it is. And then they see these people praying for one another, caring for one another, visiting each other in the hospital, taking food over to somebody who's grieving, and then they see what the church is about, and all of a sudden, the light comes on, and amazing things happen. I mean, absolutely critical. I think I have a slide about this. If I can get to it, let me see. Yeah, look. So here's the idea. What do we miss here? Rally day. Your rally day can be an event. That can be your event where you have your bouncy house and all that stuff. And why not? I'm not above gimmicks. Get them in the door. For some people, just stepping foot on the church site is a huge deal for one reason or another. Preschool events. What's that? Oh, Pastor in the dunk tank. Yeah. Sorry, that was not my idea, pastors. I want you to know that came from, what's your name? I've been the guy in the dunk tank. Yes. That's it. Or throw a pie in the pastor's face. Oh my gosh, kids will invite their friends. Yep, absolutely. If you've got a preschool, how many of you have preschool in your church? Yeah, there are thousands of preschools across the ELCA. And now, if your idea is, we're going to have a preschool so that we can recruit members, it's not going to work. That's not how it works. You do a preschool because it's a ministry, because children who go to preschool tend to read better when they get to kindergarten. It's a predictor of how well they'll do even into the 3rd grade. It's really important. I used to think it was a bad thing to take my child to preschool because we needed the break. But what I found out is they were getting socialized, they were learning, and here's the other thing. In a church preschool, they're learning Bible stories and Bible songs every day. Every day. Our kids in Sunday school get an hour on Sunday morning. If you still have a Sunday school, anybody still have a Sunday school? Okay, they get an hour on Sunday morning, but these kids in the preschool were getting evangelized at 20 times the rate of the kids that just came to Sunday school every other week, right? It's a huge ministry. And it's a blessing to the families, and they remember it for years to come. And the kind of donations we've gotten out of that tell me that their hearts were there, because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And their hearts were there. It was an amazing sort of thing that happened. That preschool can make a huge difference. And there are kids that come up to me to this day in the grocery store that are this big, and they go, Pastor Mike. I'm like, who are you? It's Jeffy, you know. Remember, Jesus loves me for Sunbeam? Okay, yeah, just kidding. We didn't say that song today. Where are we here? Blessing of the Pets. October 4th, St. Francis Day. Every year, put on an alb and your brightest, most colorful stoles and call the newspaper, and they will come out and you will get on the front page of the paper. It's free press. People will come, they'll bring their pets, and you will discover how important people's pets are to them. Think about your own pets, how much you love them, how much a part of the family they become, how dear they are to you, and you come and you bless the animals. We are connecting people in spiritual ways. We are taking spiritual, and it could be in the park, it could be at your place, it could be at your congregation. I don't suggest you do it in church on Sunday morning because it will hate you, but it's really up to you. Think it through. We already talked about Fall Festival, preschool event, Christmas, Easter services. Yeah, we have preschool graduation, and we get parents and grandparents and people from the community. I mean, packed that church. And they look around and, boy, have pamphlets out about your small groups and all the cool stuff that's going on, your service project, whatever it is. Have a fake, habitat wall along, over here so that people kind of see what you're doing. They're like, ooh, this is kind of cool. This is right here in our neighborhood. We ought to think about going to this church. Christmas and Easter services. Those are big events. There's a lot of people out there that think, let's go to church on Christmas Eve this year. Where are we going to go? Well, how do they know where to go? How do they know what time your services are? How do they get connected to that? There better be something on your front porch. I had amazing. I drove by one of our churches, and it was the week before Christmas, and there was nothing out there about when their services are. And I thought, how many people are going to get to come? I mean, unless you have your members inviting members, and you have some way to let people know that they are welcome, they don't know that they're welcome. I used to ask churches this question a lot. I don't ask it so much anymore. I said, if your church disappeared tomorrow, what would be the impact on the community? And I had one church that said to me, I think it'd be zero because they don't know we're here. We're just here behind the trees. A little group of people that meet together for church on Sunday morning. So how do we kind of turn the tables on that a little bit? How do we have a presence in the community? I went to one church and I stopped at the gas station across the street and I said, I'm looking for St. Luke's Lutheran Church. Can you tell me where it is? And they said, no, we don't know. I pointed through the window and I said, that's it right there. And they're like, okay. I do this a lot. It's a bishop trick. New bishop, whoever you are, when you pull into town, arrive early, start asking people where the church is. You'll learn a lot. It's kind of amazing. So I'm standing in the fellowship hall with the president of the congregation, and I said, hey, I pointed at the gas station through the window, and I said, I stopped at that gas station, and I said, I asked where the church was, and they didn't know where it was. And he said, yeah, I've been thinking we need a bigger sign. And I said, okay. There are other ways to have a presence in the community. What is your ministry in the community? Jesus. Somebody once said, how effective would Jesus preaching if it had not been accompanied with his healing ministry in the community? How effective will our preaching of the gospel be if it is not accompanied with the healing ministry in the community? And I mean more than just taking green beans, some drop off green beans in the offering on Sunday and somebody takes them to the local food pantry. How do we connect people with people? Let's go to the food pantry. Let's serve. Let's get in a relationship with the people that we're trying to serve. Easter egg hunt. I used to kind of be against these. Some seminary professor told me that this was a pagan ritual, and so I decided that I wasn't going to tolerate Easter egg hunts. But my gosh, people want an Easter egg hunt on Sunday morning. Go and figure. Do the biggest Easter egg hunt you possibly can between services on Sunday morning with colored eggs out on the church lawn that everybody can see, and they're going to want to bring their children, and they might stick around for church because there's fun stuff going on. Get a reputation in the community for that. Baccalaureate, as multi-church events, do something with a local church down the street, especially if there's a church of another denomination or another ethnic background that you can build a bridge. When people see, they think churches are bad sometimes. A lot of unchurched people are worried about churches, and they see you doing good stuff, they're going to want to be a part of it. We talked about Vacation Bible School, Summer Fest, Super Bowl party. People go, oh, it's a Super Bowl, it's going to be a low Sunday, nobody's going to be in church. Well, have a Super Bowl party. Throw up a screen. Invite people to be part. Tell them to wear their favorite team's outfit to church. Let them get in the spirit. Some of our congregations have done the Super Bowl of caring where they raise funds for hunger and so forth. I mean, get into the spirit of it. You'll have record attendance on Super Bowl Sunday. It doesn't have to be that way. We talked about funerals, church in the park, service projects, confirmation. I tell you what, the people who invited the most people to my church were the confirmation students. Because when they realized here's a place where adults are talking to kids like adults about real issues, and that we weren't afraid to skirt the real issues that were going on. They wanted to be a part of that. I remember when Jenny came and we were going to talk about the Trinity, and we went around, we were just doing a check-in, and she said, this week my mom and dad told me they're getting a divorce. I was like, okay, well, there goes the lesson plan. That's what we're going to talk about today. And the other kids around the table said, I remember that day. And this is what it's been like for me. I got 2 bedrooms now, one at my mom's house, one at my dad's house. And they wrapped their arms around her and they loved on her and they said, it's going to be okay. We got your back. There was ministry that happened. And kids bring their friends to that kind of ministry. Now, how do we do that for adults? Gosh, how do we do that for adults? How do we create buzz in the community? And it's not just about bringing people to your church. It's also about who you are in the community. Those of you who are lay people, what do you do out in the world? And what difference does it make? I remember I was at Margaret's house and Felix was dying. It was his last day on this earth, and he was dying in his bedroom, in his bed, in their small house. They didn't have much money. It was a very small house, and it was leaking. It was pouring down rain outside. It was leaking through the roof. Turns out it was not because the roof was leaking. It was because the air conditioning had plugged up, and it was pouring through the ceiling. And I called these air conditioning guys, but it was the worst storm we had had in years, and nobody would come out. I finally got somebody I'd never heard of out in the woods. Jack Gordon, his name was. And I called, and he said, I'll be right there. And he came right over and he fixed it. He stopped the leaking. He plugged it up. He did a bunch of stuff. And he saw what was going on in the house. He figured it out. And nobody talked to him about it. He just figured out what was happening. And I walked him to the door and I said, send me the bill. And he said, there's not going to be a bill. I called that guy this week. We still use that guy 25 years later. 20 years later, we still use that guy for our air conditioning because this week I came home and there was water pouring down in our air conditioning unit plugged up. We have air conditioning units in the ceiling. Do you have that here? It's so stupid. We can't have basements because creepy things grow in basements in Texas. You don't want to have them and so forth. But listen, what I'm trying to say is whatever you do, pay attention to the vulnerable people in your work life and be a witness to the gospel of Jesus Christ in what you do, and it will make a huge difference. I just want to get through planting. I got 1 minute left. Confirmation, concerts, speakers, classes, book study series, groups, neighborhood meetings. Let your church be a neighborhood meeting center. Don't charge them. Have a spot for the police to come and take a break. Have coffee on, whatever. Breakfast goes back to food. You know, and we talked about free barbecue. Oh, how'd that get in there? Anyway. Okay, I'll get to this in a moment. Let's call pause on this. I was supposed to start at 5 till. I'm so sorry. I lost track of the time. And so I want to invite, come on forward. They're going to talk you to lunch.